Miranda Paul is a children's writer who is passionate about creating stories for young readers that inspire, entertain, and broaden horizons. In addition to more than 50 short stories for magazines and digital markets, Miranda is the author of several forthcoming picture books from imprints of Lerner, Macmillan, and Random House. Her debut picture book, One Plastic Bag, Isatou Ceesay, and the Recycling Women of the Gambia, tells the inspiring story of 5 women who creatively dealt with their village's plastic trash problem. Despite limited resources and ridicule, Isatou and her friends persevered for more than a decade, eventually realizing economic empowerment through their recycled plastic purse project. Miranda recently sat down with me to talk about her writing journey and her other passion, which is creating diversity in children's literature. So hi, Miranda. I know you're really busy, and I so appreciate you taking time to talk with us today for a little bit about writing and everything you're involved in. I wanted to start off talking a bit about your new book, One Plastic Bag. Can you tell us a little bit about how that book came about and sort of the evolution of the whole idea?
Yeah, okay, so it was about 12 years ago when I first went to Gambia as a volunteer teacher to start a project there. I didn't know that I was going to write a book about anything, or even that I would end up writing books as a career. But I came across a woman who was a project. I didn't meet Isatou the first time I was there, but I came across these wonderful recycled plastic bags, and it was a great solution to one of the biggest problems I saw with the landscape was that trash is everywhere, and there was no system for collecting trash or managing trash. And I said, I really want to meet this woman. I brought them back, all these purses for my friends and family. And over the course of, several years after that, I got more involved in fair trade and in environmental projects. And on my 3rd trip back to the Gambia, I actually got to sit down, meet Isatou, and interview women in the village. I still didn't know at that point that I would be writing a children's book about it, but I had some articles and other kinds of writing projects that I wanted to do to tell their story.
Mm-hmm. How long then from that sort of point until now? So you said it basically started 12 years ago.
The first time that I interviewed Isatou and all the women in the village was 2007. Mm-hmm. And obviously we're in 2015 now. And I have in part of my presentation that I do for kids is to tell them about how, if an idea sticks with you enough for 12, over the course of 10 years or 12 years, maybe it's something worth, continuing on and following your dream with. But yeah, so I first met her in 2007. I didn't actually write the picture book manuscript until 2011. Mm-hmm. I had originally kind of interviewed Isatou because she does a lot of different kinds of amazing projects. I'd originally thought that maybe I would help her write her memoir. And that didn't exactly come to fruition for a number of reasons. But I decided when I got into children's writing, when I was freelancing at that point in 2010, I started freelancing for children's markets. I thought that this would make a great tie-in for kids in school, the idea of having an idea and other people, kind of laugh at it. I mean, kids come up with great ideas all the time, and we don't always give them the time of day. And that's the same sort of thing that happened to Isatou. And I just saw a lot of connections for that, early elementary ages to Isatou's story.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting because when you are writing nonfiction, especially on the picture book level, you do need to have that thread in the story that resonates with the young children. And so I was going to ask you, this is a big topic, and Isatou has done so many amazing things. How did you kind of find the way into her story that would work for a picture book?
When I started, how picture books often start is the story was quite a bit longer. Yeah. When I started. And then you just have to literally step back and distill it and say, what would be interesting to a child? What would a child relate to? And what things do I have in there that I'm putting in there because I want to show people what it's like in Gambia or what I think is great about Isatou's project or something. So there's a stepping back that happens. And in my writing journey, I did a lot of writing, a lot of manuscripts. This was not the first picture book that I wrote. This is not the first manuscript by any means. But I think that what I did was I wrote for years before I really submitted things. And so by the point that I had written this story, I was okay with stepping back. Okay, let's cross something out. Let's rework. I wasn't so tied to my words at that point in my writing journey. And so I think that made it a little bit easier to be more objective, because if I had started in 2007, if I was writing a kid's book and didn't know as much and hadn't been working on my craft, this story would probably have been like 2,500 words and, you know, that sort of thing. But now I think I have a better understanding of how to write more tightly for children, and really focus on the one thread that is for this story.
And I think that's a really good point. You have to at some point serve the story and your audience, not yourself as the writer. And, you know, there may be things that you really want to put in the book that are important to you, but they might not serve the story or be relevant to your audience. And so you have to be able to step back and take them out. And I think that is a very hard thing for a lot of writers to learn, but it's really important. I mean, you have to, especially if you're writing picture books.
Well, and when you write nonfiction, there's always just all these amazing things you find out that may never make it in the book. But then when you do school visits, sometimes you can pull some of those back out and share them.
Now, you and your agent have sold 6 picture books in just over 2 years, which is a tremendous accomplishment. And you said that you've been writing for a long time. Did something just happen where things just finally came together for you? Or, you know, how did you suddenly have this great windfall of success in selling so many books in such a short time?
Yeah, it's hard for me to say like it happened all at once, because I feel like I've been doing this forever. When my agent fell in love with One Plastic Bag, and right around the time that deal was happening, I had already had 32 completed picture book manuscripts. That's not just, you know, like unfinished drafts or ideas. I mean, idea file, probably I had close to 100 in my idea file or outlines. But I had 32 picture books that had a beginning sentence and an ending sentence. You know, they were drafts. Many of them were polished. And I let her know that I had all of these. So we went through them sort of one by one and tested them out. And obviously, you know, we've sold 6. We didn't sell them all. There are still more. But I'm learning, you know, which ones to sort of put back in the drawer, which ones to have hope about, you know, how to revise, you know, those sorts of things. So when I say I sold 6, you know, that's maybe a 1 in 5 ratio of everything I write. I only actually sell 1 in 5. I have to write 4 manuscripts that are duds to get a sale. And so for me, I spent all that time before I had an agent and before I had my first book sale, writing a lot of manuscripts. I've written some since as well. I just continue to write another story. That's sort of a thing I tell writers, is when they finish one, it's like, that's great, wonderful, write another one.
Yeah.
And that's my advice, I guess. Write another one.
I think that's great advice, because a lot of beginning writers, they put everything they've got into one story, and then they just try to sell that, and if it doesn't sell, they give up. And you're right, you have to just keep producing, because I think 1 in 5 is a very common ratio for sales for a lot of even writers who have been doing it for a very long time and sold a lot of books. They still have manuscripts sitting in their drawer that will not sell. But it's all a learning process. Like you said, you learn from each one, and then you finally hit it right and get those sales.
I still get rejections. I got rejections this week. I did. I think on Monday or something. So it happens. Yeah. I don't get as sad about it as I used to. I just know that it's that, okay, it didn't fit for that house at that time, and okay, let's move on. You know, like, got the answer. Let's keep going on, I guess.
Do you have any other tips for writing, especially nonfiction for young kids? I mean, you seem to have a knack for conveying information in a very sort of lyrical, engaging way that feels like a story more than just listing facts or, telling readers something that they should know. Do you have any other sort of writing tips on giving that feel to your books, especially for nonfiction?
Yeah, that's a really good point that you bring up. Is I don't think that the word should, the way that a child should feel or what a child should learn, I try to keep that word should out of my mission for writing books. Because when I was growing up, and I think a lot of people will probably share this feeling, is that learning history or sometimes learning science was so boring in the textbooks. It just wasn't engaging. I mean, I hated history growing up. It just didn't make sense. It just seemed like facts and dates that you had to memorize. I didn't understand how it related to me and my life. And I don't think that I fully felt as excited about nonfiction subjects or history until late high school, early college, because I started reading novels that were historical fiction or other ways in which I could relate to a universal sort of theme, a theme of loss or a theme of change or something like that. And so I think that is something I strive for, is to be lyrical, to be engaging, that if there's facts there, they're presented in a way that really considers the audience, who's reading this book and how can I reach them. And so for me to put the children first and say, okay, I got to think about where they're at and what they're thinking and how they're going to connect to this, then I can maybe impart some information. But the goal is really just to entertain, to broaden horizons, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. And when you're writing, do you especially with nonfiction, I know you've written fiction as well, but when you're writing a picture book, writers always have to sort of leave room for the illustrations, not say too much so that the illustrator can add to the story with the pictures. Do you have those same considerations when writing nonfiction as well, or do you put more of the information in the words with nonfiction?
Yeah, with nonfiction, it can be a little bit tricky because, like for me at One Plastic Bag, I was the supplier of the resources of the nonfiction resources, photos of Isatou, photos of the other women in the village, the plastic bags, the timeline, so that, I could tell the illustrator, how old was she in this scene, how old was she, that she had, she had a baby and there needed to be a baby on her back in the pictures, in the latter part of it. Those sorts of things, they say you're not going to be involved in the illustration process, but that wasn't the case for me. With One Plastic Bag, just because I had the resources, and it was very important to us to get things right, culturally right, but just also for Isatou. She's left-handed, so you'll see that even she's using her scissors with the left hand in one of the illustrations, and so that is just important. And Elizabeth Zunon did a fantastic job, just fantastic with those illustrations. And then Water is Water, which comes out in May, I had no illustrator notes. That's a 147-word book. It's a lyrical water cycle journey with these two brother and sister, but it came in with no illustrator notes. I had none on the text, and so there was a lot of possibility for illustrations, a lot of room open for the illustrator there.
Now, let's switch gears a little bit here. In your school visits, are there particular things that you found work really well with the kids when you go there and keep them really interested in who you are and writing?
Yeah, when I was teaching, we always had this 10 and 2 rule. And so I try to do where no presentation I do has longer than 10 minutes of me presenting before they engage. So if I'm presenting, say, for 10 minutes, then I'll have at least 2 minutes where they get to respond or they're engaged doing an activity. So it never gets long, so it never gets old. It's always, there's like segments in my presentations. So if I have to give, I have a 1-hour presentation that I give usually for second, third graders, we break it up. So it's, there's 10 minutes of this part, and then there's 2 minutes of an activity, 10 minutes of something else. And then, so it's not just one big, long thing. I have children of my own too. I know what their attention span is like, and I also know that kids, they want to raise their hand. They want to ask a question. They want to talk about themselves. It's not necessarily about me or my book when I come. I don't just, go up in front of class, read about my book, and talk about myself. I like to turn it on them and ask them questions. We do sometimes a drumming and dancing activity. And we get their teachers to have to dance in front of the class. So, yeah.
Great. Now, you're also the Executive VP of Outreach for We Need Diverse Books. Can you tell us a little bit about that particular organization and how writers could become involved if they want?
Yeah, I'm extremely proud of the team. It's a large team that makes up We Need Diverse Books. I'm so proud of all the accomplishments that have come in such a short time. It hasn't even been a year at this point, but we can already see change, and some of the letters that we're getting from people in the industry is really amazing. But what you say about, how can authors jump in and help? I wrote a post last year about this very thing. Is as writers, we often think right away, well, what should I write about it? But we have to remember to step back, that as writers, we are part of a bigger community, and we're not just authors. So sometimes we're teachers, sometimes we're librarians, sometimes we're just book champions, we're book lovers. And so there's a lot of roles that we can play in this diversity movement that don't necessarily have to be writing a diverse book, that we can be writing a review of a diverse book. We can be walking into our library and saying, have you seen this book? You need to get this book for our collection in our local library. You could do, volunteer to do a reading at a school of a diverse book. You can give diverse books as gifts. You could invite a diverse author to your kid's school. Even just sometimes Twitter shout outs. Like, if you read a really great diverse book, don't keep it to yourself. Put it on Goodreads and give it 5 stars. The thing is about visibility of books. We all know that as authors. We're all struggling for that visibility. How do you get your book out there? And we know that each other helping each other can really be powerful. And so that's just something to keep in mind, is that we know from the numbers and from, marketing dollars and how they get advocated, is that diverse books have not risen to the levels that they should be to reflect today's kids. And so we can all join together, and we can really, we can change that. I really believe that we can vote with our dollars and change that. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to read the actual statement from our forthcoming annual report. Mm-hmm. And it says, how We Need Diverse Books defines diversity is that we recognize all diverse experiences, including but not limited to LGBTQIA, gender diversity, people of color, people with disabilities, ethnic, cultural, and religious minorities. Mm-hmm. So as you can see, it's very inclusive, and it's not limited to that. We obviously include the deaf community, which not everyone in the deaf community considers themselves disabled. And so we focus on self-identification. So how do you self-identify in your diversity? And we are really trying to get those non-majority narratives, as well as non-majority authors, visibility.
Do you have any final advice for aspiring writers, especially those who want to do something truly significant with their books and really make an impact on the world?
I guess the advice I would have given myself, maybe around that 2010, 2011, even maybe some of 2012, before I had an agent, I would have given myself the advice to shut off the internet a little bit more and stop listening to other people's advice. Honestly, there's so much advice out there. You can get all kinds of craft tips. You can get all kinds of marketing and platform and business tips. And to be honest, before you have your breakout books written really well, and that can be a big distraction sometimes, that's what I would have told myself. That maybe not be the best advice for other people, but shut off the internet and write, because after your books come out, my goodness, you have to guard your writing time with like a shield. So use that time, if you've got it, try. And I know I was working as a teacher. And so my writing time was so precious to me, in between being a mom and being a teacher. And then when I started freelancing, my time to work on creative projects was very limited. And so turning off the internet meant I got things done.
Well, thank you, Miranda. This has been wonderful, and I wish you the best of luck with all of your books. And I encourage everyone listening to this to to go to Miranda's website. And we look forward to hearing more from you in the future and seeing more of your books as they come out. Bye.
Thank you. Have a good one.